In today's episode, we meet with Jenny West to talk about the importance of feedback loops and how to engage with your audience to get the best feedback.
Jenny is a content strategist and training development manager for Nike, where she works alongside a dozen teams to find ways to bring compelling content to life.
You're listening to the Meaningful Content Mixer. I'm Bonnie, a content professional focused on pre-sales and product marketing.
And I'm Sarah, a content professional focused on post-sale knowledge management. Together, we like to explore what it takes to create meaningful content that is purposeful, demand-driven, and contextually relevant.
We are sharing strategies, tactics, and stories that help content professionals across disciplines create more meaningful content that drives successful outcomes for their customers.
Let's get started.
Welcome, Jenny. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, so I actually went to grad school with Jenny for our Tech Comm program. So
that's fun.
Yeah, years and years ago.
I think the best part of that program was like it was a great program, like a wonderful tech comm program. And like there were so few tech writers compared to like,
oh my gosh, that's so true.
All the rhetoric people and the literature people and the poetry people. But then you knew exactly who the tech writers were whenever thesis time came around, and figure out how to like make things happen in Word. They're like, "Where's the tech comm people?"
So what's your role now like? What do you focus on, and what's that like?
Yeah, so I am the content strategy and training development manager for our North American Nike stores. So Canada, Puerto Rico, and the US. Anyone who works in one of our stores that has a swoosh on it, my team handles the training curriculum that goes out for them. So we work in partnership with other teams to bring a wide range of curriculum needs to life. So it takes a few different forms. One of the ways that comes to life is actually creating some training. Another way that it comes to life is taking training that others have created for a broader audience and localizing and narrowing it based upon the needs of our team. And the other piece is communicating about all of that. So I do a lot of change management communication. I manage the platform upon which we communicate to stores, and also the platform where we house our current training, and all of the other things that lie in between. So I manage a team of 2, and we sit on a larger team that's focused on training development, training assessment, and training delivery. And then that team is housed within our store operations team. So we get to hear about all of the ways that our teams need additional support, the ways that things are being delivered successfully, the places where we may have some snag points. So yeah, it's wild. It keeps me very busy, but in delightful ways.
Yeah, and that's pretty cool. I mean, the content that you're creating is really touching every person who is working at the company, basically.
Definitely, like on the retail side, like Nike is such a big place. It's huge.
Yeah.
But it's amazing to walk into one of those stores and to interact with someone who just reviewed the content that you created like that morning, or your team delivered, like moments ago. It's definitely wild. It's a wild experience.
Do you ever go into a store and ask like, what do you think about this product material? What's the difference between this one and this one? And just quiz them on the
content.
Yeah.
Like secret shopper tests.
Yeah.
All the time. but that's really that is the ultimate test, right? Like we want to know how effective the content that we're delivering is. So it's not like, hey, go study up and then we're going to find out. It's no, like you're going to be in this situation with a consumer. I'm a consumer right now. So let's have this interaction. I'm interested in these leggings. I'm interested in these shoes. Or just like figuring out, hey, can you check and see if this is an inventory and see how well they can navigate the tools to be able to do that. So yeah, all the time, any opportunity that I get, I'm like, let's go drop in the Nike store.
How much time have you spent in the stores sort of in preparation to get a sense of what it's really like from folks, day in, day out in the store, and so that you're creating content that helps them apply it based on their reality versus you on the other side?
Yeah. So not coming from a retail background, both worked really well for me and also kind of like held me back a little bit. So it's a weird balance. That curious mind really comes in handy.
Mm-hmm.
Do not be afraid to ask questions, right? So I was able to spend at least one full day in a store with teams and kind of just figure out what some of the process looks like and what it looks like to be someone who works in a store. And then I've also had the opportunity to travel to go and visit other stores to kind of like, after I knew more and I already could anticipate what some of the pain points were, or at least could guess about some of the context that we needed to collect. I was able to go and travel around our LA market whenever we were opening a couple new stores there to just figure some things out and ask some questions. But I think the most valuable outlets that I have for communicating with our fleet, they're rooted in the fact that I've seen what they do, but they're also rooted in the fact that I know the information that's coming down to them. And so I know where to go if I need to go and change something or if we need to partner with another team. And so we have weekly calls and then more calls that happen on different cadences. A multitude of calls take place to be able to just allow people to say, hey, this is a problem that I ran into. And like, I don't know who needs to be involved in the solution, but we need a solution because it's a pain point for the store. And so then we take that information and we action on it in any way that we can. And sometimes there are things that it takes us a long time to figure out how to fix, or to figure out if the problem that's being reported is in fact a problem, or is it a symptom of a larger problem that we need to address in a different way? So like content as a problem solving mechanism is something that I never thought that content could be. And if I would have known that it would have been those things like earlier on in my career, I think I would have had a much different career trajectory. But I'm happy I'm here.
Yeah, hey. When you do make changes based off of pain points, do you get positive feedback that it was successful, or is it a no news is good news kind of thing and you're only ever sort of responding off of constructive needs?
Yeah, I think that this is a really interesting area, because the thing that I've learned is you have to open the door for feedback. And the best way to do that is relationships. But if you have such a huge fleet that you're working with, or such a massive audience that you're working with, and they don't know you, they don't know that you're receptive to feedback, or they don't know what kind of feedback you need, the merit of what's going out there really can't be trusted. Like you have to do those check-in points and you have to elicit the feedback. I think that there's also a moment where kind of in the discussion of, is this a symptom of a larger problem, or is this a problem itself? The context that feedback is being delivered upon or within is incredibly important. So if our understandings of what's going on are not aligned, I think that the problem is taking place in one system and you're experiencing it in another. Or you had a weird interaction with someone and you weren't prepared to handle it, but you're looking at the wrong training. And so I can't fix the correct training because we're not looking at the same thing. The commonality of our experience has to be, we have to find a center. And then we can start exploring. Like we always have to have that focal point, and then we can start coloring things in. Whenever I was teaching English during grad school, the thing that we would always, from a TA perspective, remind our students and each other is like, I can't read minds. I would love it.
Of course.
It's not for lack of trying. And the opening the door and building those relationships for being able to acquire effective feedback and by multiple means necessary. Focus groups, simply an email, creating forums for those things, established feedback forms. They allow you to build that relationship of trust to where the person knows that you're asking the question to help benefit their experience. And their experience is the thing that matters. It's not my experience.
Yeah. That's such a good point. And I was like, so recently, I was working with a team to, so, I'm in product marketing. And so I was working with a business development team to try to get more feedback into what they're seeing in the field. Cause they're the people who call leads first. Right. And so I'm like, I'm trying to get feedback about what people are interested in, what they like what's drawing them in, what are the things that they're saying, what are key things that I can tap into. But they didn't necessarily have that context of why I would need that feedback. And so in our first call, it was basically like we wanted to create a feedback loop. And so I sat with the team and it was just like, I wanted to go in and be like, well, give me your feedback. But they didn't know like what feedback would be valuable or what they should say. And so one person was brave enough to attempt to give some feedback. And then I took that and I was like, great. So that's really good feedback. And here's how I'll apply that. When you say this is how I think about it. And this is what I'll pull from that and why this is valuable to me. And when you say this, maybe that would be something that I would dig into more so that I could add it to this other material. And so part of the feedback loop, I think, would be teaching people how to give you feedback. Do you find yourself doing that a lot?
All the time. Like the number of forum emails that I have just like to send in response to some of the emails that I get, it's like, okay, like what date did this happen? What was the method that you used to log into that system and all of those things?
Yeah.
But I also think that you bring up a really wonderful additional point, which whenever we're working with change management, sometimes we have to figure out the right times to ask for that feedback. And sometimes we're just not presenting the opportunity for providing feedback at the right time. And that affects the questions that we ask. It affects the kinds of responses that we're going to get. But there are particular points where sometimes eliciting feedback at a particular moment or eliciting the wrong kind of feedback at a particular moment can undercut your mission, right? If you're trying to make a change in behavior that audience has never experienced before, they may not know how they want to interact with something. They may not know what they want their user experience to be. They know what they want the end result to be, right? They want things to be easier. They want more access. They want to be able to find things very quickly. But the modes and the means by which they get there, they may not have a clear vision of how that needs to come together. And they may also not agree with some of the incremental steps that need to take place. In product development, you have like, the entire kitchen, the whole house and the kitchen are on the table, right? Like everything has to be tended to. It's about those polished finishes. And there's so much work that needs to go into just creating capability and incremental capability. And so in presenting particular audiences with the opportunity to provide feedback at particular times, what the end is. You're like, okay, well, we want to be able to measure this. And so we want to know if you can do this, but we may not be asking the question of, well, can you do this little bit of it right now? And is that enough? Like just getting to here, did that feel okay? We know that we want to run the rest of the marathon, but we're not there yet. Like, let's lace our shoes. Did we get our shoes on? Are they
Yeah, I have a takeaway just from the last couple minutes talking here, which is that we've talked so much in previous episodes, and I think throughout my career, of context, customer context when it comes to content creation. And I think that we put a lot of energy into that. What's the context? What's their need? What's their intent when you're creating the content? But honestly, it hasn't really occurred to me before to think that much about context when it comes to soliciting feedback. You think it's easy to think about feedback as just like a simple, step later on in the content life cycle. But what I'm hearing is that, and it totally makes sense, that as much energy needs to be applied to the context for the feedback process as happens during the content creation process.
Yeah, I think that that's definitely the case. And I think that I've learned that the hard way. Projects. Luckily, it didn't turn out to be like expensive fixes. I can always kind of pull people aside and like, I think that this is all wonderful feedback. We're going to take it. We're going to process it. We're going to see what we can do with it. And then we're going to regroup and we're going to come back at you with the same questions or different places where we're going to ask these questions. Yeah, it's a weird lesson to learn too, because you're bringing it, and depending on your role, you may have people who are expecting to kind of have those shiny results of the feedback to be able to trigger those actions that need to be taken. And sometimes you're just like, we're not ready yet. Like we need to take a step back and we need to make sure that we're delivering the best experience, but we're not ready to talk about the experience. Right now, we just need to talk about that first step or the first 3 steps.
Yeah. I can imagine that working at some place like Nike, being so big and they're always coming up with new stuff, that the energy must be pretty fast paced. And like, how are you able to get that feedback in such a fast paced environment?
Yeah, that's a good question. Sometimes we're not, and sometimes we are. It depends on what's going on with the business and what's going on with the individuals. I have 2 strategies that I do when working with feedback loops and establishing them. So the first is make sure that like there's the time to be able to do this. So like, we all know if you've got 1.5 billion things on your plate, like it doesn't matter how important empathetically that is for someone else. And even if you're contributing to a larger message, if it's not the thing if there's not enough time to fit it in, then you're not going to get great results from it. But the other piece is you need to make sure that you've got passionate people. So if I'm soliciting feedback from someone about a training program and they don't really care about training, they're like, yeah, training's cute, but we do other things over here, and they're in the important things. First off, I would have a lot of feedback for them, but the best feedback is going to come from people who want to help you make improvements. That doesn't mean that the other individuals don't have really important things to say. It's just probably not going to be as in-depth or with as much context. So being able to identify people's passions and being able to help people grow in their career from those passions and based upon them, help connect them with the right people, that's an added benefit from those relationships. But you also get really wonderful functional feedback. So I have the luxury of working with teams that are designed to do these things, who also get to interact with people who are in our field. So we have a bit of a network for some of this stuff. It's not perfect. It still needs to grow. I just want people to be able to contribute to the stuff that they're passionate about in literally every category. I also would love a bigger team to be able to help me to address very quickly. So those are the 2 main tenets. I think an additional subtenet is if you make people mad with something, if you just put something out there that like really isn't accomplishing the means, they're going to have feedback about it. And that's if you can't set up the other things and you don't have enough to get to somewhere, and you know that the implications are going to be pretty menial, you can always just tick people off, and then they'll have a lot to say.
I will say I've kind of done a version of that at times when I've been responsible for a lot of content and you're not sure what content is being used. Maybe you don't have access to all the data you want. I've archived content before and just kind of waited to see if anyone complained. And I've experienced some passionate complaints. Like, where did this go? I was using it. I'm like, okay, now I know. I know who's using it, and I can talk to them
Yeah, it's
I don't suggest that as like a, a strategy, but
I agree. It feels a little sneaky.
yeah.
Sometimes you have to get a little creative with the way that you're listening.
Yeah. Getting creative. Yeah.
But it sounds like, yeah, again, thinking about how to sort of cultivate a feedback loop, and that what you were talking about in terms of motivators, like how can you motivate someone into providing feedback, just like in change management and organizational strategy, like employee engagement, how are you motivating your employees? And it's different for a lot of people. And so finding ways, like Bonnie was talking about in her example earlier, finding ways to really convey why and how feedback matters, and creating opportunity for folks to sort of tap into what would motivate them to participate in the feedback loop. I really like that idea.
Yeah, motivation is an interesting thing too, because a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, like if there's not a hoodie dangling at the end for somebody to win or something learning mind. And I think that that's the case for a lot of things, but it seems like it's more the case for things where it's like, it's like a weird company asking you for like feedback about something that like, it's fine. Like it got me the thing that I needed. I don't know what else to tell you, like, would you recommend this? It's like, this isn't a thing that I talk to anybody about. No, I wouldn't recommend it, but I also wouldn't have that conversation. So ask a different question. I've found that a lot of the motivation that comes from at least the operations side of many things is just the ability to be able to have confidence that we're doing the thing better and that the thing goes more smoothly. Like it's crazy how motivating that is. Like we all just want to be able to do our job well and to make sure that like our teams are successful, efficient, happy, cared for, supported, and looking out for one another, and our ability to get things done is a huge motivator, particularly for people who are really effective in leadership positions, because they can turn it around and they can do that storytelling. I find that I have to do a lot of storytelling in my job. It's like, okay, but it's context. It's just the context of why this is important. So let me walk you through a scenario of why this is important. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to take this and we're going to apply it in these ways, like Bonnie said. So yeah, like motivation it's confounding, but it's also really uplifting.
Yeah. We were talking the other day and you said something, you're not being asked to write, you're being asked to think. And I can't remember what triggered that comment, but I want to dig into that a little bit more.
Yeah. So I remember in grad school like, teaching different classes. It taught, like basic writing, taught technical communication, freshman comp, maybe some other things. I don't know. That feels like enough. That feels like a little while ago, and time doesn't matter anymore now that we're all.
Yeah, that's true. It doesn't. It's not real.
But like so many students, and I feel like a lot of individuals kind of had this experience. So many students would come in, and they're like, I am not a confident writer at all. It was like, okay, well, can you form opinions? Like, do you have opinions about things? Tell me about something that you really love or that you really hate. Like, let's play an emotional card here for a second. And they would be able to structure an argument beautifully. It's like, okay, well, let's just like take a pen and write it down. Like we can actually dictate it into your computer if you want to, and it can happen that way. Then we'll go back and we'll polish. That's what writing is. Like it's not just the application of rules to words on paper. Good writing is really just good thinking. And I think I was telling Bonnie, I have a little notebook that I just have random quotes in. Just the way that someone viewed the world or viewed a situation that to me just rang beautifully. And it was either beautiful because it was so accurate or beautiful because it was so creative. And it's my little appreciation notebook for wonderful words. But it's really so much more than that. It's the appreciation for humanity viewing the world that way. And I think that there's beauty in the creativity, but there can also be so much beauty in just an individual's ability to take something as mundane as a process and make it as simple and as clear as possible. That's not the writing that we typically talk about whenever we're like, oh my gosh, Pulitzer Prize.
Yeah.
But there is so much more that goes into the writing process than merely writing the words down. Content creation is the process of being able to think through a thought, think through what some of the other twists and turns can be, anticipate them, put them in order, and deliver them to where they can reach out to another person. And that kind of storytelling has always been the thing that's like reconnected me with content. And it's the thing that gets me excited about it. It's also the thing that helps me drive my team, because they're not always asked to write the most compelling stuff. It's like, okay, go write a training about this. It's like, I know that it seems very small. Like you're being asked to write a conversation guide for a 10-minute meeting, but here's what we're accomplishing. And whenever you think through all of the feedback that leader is going to get, and you can anticipate some of those conversation points, you're being more empathetic to that individual. I always think of operational empathy. I think I've used the word empathy like 1,000 times in this conversation, but it's so important in the writing process.
Yes, it is.
Where are we? Where are they? Where do we meet in the middle? But also, where do we meet each other on each other's sides?
Mm-hmm.
We have to explore all of those positions. And the thoughtfulness of writing is the thing that makes it effective and compelling.
Totally agree. Easier said than done. I think it's a constant thing we have to practice, right? And it's easy. It's too easy to just go through the motions, especially with, tight deadlines and the fast-paced environment. I think I've had this thought percolating for a little while of just creating a checklist for myself of before I published, because I think the sort of hard skills of publishing content, I've practiced for years enough that I don't even have to really think twice about them, but it's the sort of like warm and fuzzy soft skills, the empathy. Like it sounds a little mechanical that I need a checklist to remind myself to be empathetic when I'm creating content, but like that, like what are those checkpoints that we need to remember?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a really wonderful leader on our team always says, we're not doing this job for us. We're doing it for the person that doesn't know our name, who's working in a place that we've never been before. And it's about their experience. It's about the things that they're going through. So applying that to every piece of content creation, like regardless of how like bone dry it needs to be. I will always try to insert moments of context. Sometimes it's just a sentence. Sometimes it's just within the communication within which it's delivered. But those moments of figuring out how the empathy kind of reaches across whatever the medium is, those are my favorite moments.
Okay, well, it's been wonderful talking to you today. I've had my eyes opened about thinking about context and feedback in a new way, so I really appreciate that. Before we say goodbye, one final question that we like to ask all our guests is that here at Meaningful Content, we like to seek inspiration in unexpected places. So I'm curious where you seek inspiration.
I read a lot of behavioral economics.
Interesting.
And also just like UX things. So one of my favorite books, it's a little outdated now, but I come back to it a lot, is The Design of Everyday Things by Don Norman. And the coolest thing about it is it kind of reminds you that like you're not wrong and you're not crazy whenever things seem like they're like awkwardly designed.
Mm-hmm.
And so essentially it's like, like designers don't always get it right. And that's like an important piece of the process. So kind of like digging into some of those things. And then I read a ton of The New Yorker. I'm a huge New Yorker fan. And I always find things where I'm like, oh my gosh, let's go change the world. What are we doing? Let's just put your shoes on. Let's go.
Love it. All right, let's go do that.
Yeah, yeah, it's time. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Jenny. It was a great talking to you, and we got some really great insights about feedback.
Thank you
Yeah,
so much
appreciate
for
it.
having me. I really appreciate it.